You're going to love the retirement home, Mom. They even have knitting classes. Penelope's smile was as artificial as her eyelash extensions. Charles nodded beside her like a trained puppy, while Leo was already calculating how much they'd pocket once my properties were sold. I smiled and agreed, saying it sounded wonderful, but inside, something broke beyond repair. They had chosen the most upscale restaurant in the city for this performance. White linen tablecloths. Crystal glasses glowing in the evening light. The smell of fresh seafood filling the air. Everything staged perfectly for an emotional ambush, designed to look like a celebration, when it felt like they were burying me alive. Mom, we know you've been a little confused lately, Charles said, his voice dripping with fake concern. He wore the gray suit I bought him for his college graduation. Now he was using it to lay me to rest. Confused. The word sliced through me. I had faked a few forgetful moments, only to test their love, to see if my children would stand by me if I ever truly needed them. The answer sat right in front of me, wrapped in the emerald green dress I once gave her with pride. Dr. Miller says this would be best, Leo added, avoiding my eyes. A safe, controlled environment, professional care, activities for people your age. People my age. As if turning 72 made me a burden instead of a woman who built a real estate empire from scratch. As if age erased dignity, value, or the right to live on my own terms. And the knitting classes are very therapeutic, Penelope chimed in, placing her hand on mine, her touch burning with insincerity. You can make tablecloths, scarves, useful things. Useful things. While they carved up my life's work like vultures circling fresh prey, I was expected to knit tablecloths in a place that smelled like disinfectant and loneliness. When do you expect this move to happen? I asked, voice steady as a calm lake before a storm. Tomorrow, Charles replied too fast. Everything's arranged. You just need to sign a few papers in. And what happens to my properties? Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. They looked at each other like guilty children caught with stolen cookies. Penelope cleared her throat, Leo shredded his napkin to pieces. Don't worry about that, Mom, Leo finally said. We'll handle everything. It's too much responsibility for you now. Too much responsibility. The same properties I had bought, renovated, and managed for decades were suddenly too much for me. The same investments I grew from an initial $5,000 into $1.5 million now supposedly required younger, smarter hands. That night, I pretended to take the sleeping pills Penelope handed me. I slipped them under my tongue and spit them into a napkin the moment she looked away. I needed a clear mind for what was coming. At 11 p.m., I heard their voices in my kitchen. They thought I was sound asleep. Their first mistake. The beach house is worth at least $300,000, Charles whispered, shuffling papers across my oak dining table, the very table where I signed my first real estate contract 40 years ago. And the downtown condo, another $200,000, plus the investments. We need to act fast, Penelope murmured, pouring champagne into the crystal anniversary glasses I once gifted her. Before she realizes what's happening. Leo laughed, that cold, arrogant laugh he developed after marrying her. Realizes? She asked me what time it was 3 times yesterday. A lie. I had staged those confused moments to test them, to see just how rotten my own blood had become. The truth now burned through me like acid. Look at this, Penelope said, waving a paper I recognized instantly, my will. Once she's in the home, we argue mental incompetence. The lawyer is already lined up. $400,000 for the main house, Charles calculated, scribbling figures. $300,000 for the beach house, $200,000 for the condo, and the investments make another $600,000. Almost $1.5 million. $1.5 million. The fruit of a lifetime of sacrifice, sleepless nights, and smart decisions, reduced to numbers they whispered over champagne, while I was supposed to be drugged in my bed. And the best part, Leo added with a grin I could hear through the walls, is she'll never know what it's really worth. She thinks it's just a few properties. They underestimated me, badly. They thought I was a confused old woman who didn't understand money, business, or strategy. They didn't know that I checked my investments every single morning, that I knew the exact value of every property, and that I had backup plans they couldn't begin to imagine. At 5 a.m., while they slept off their betrayal, I dressed in my best black pantsuit. I took only the essentials, my passport, the jewelry hidden in a secret box, and the key to a safe deposit box in a bank far from here. In that box were documents that would change everything. The taxi arrived right on time. The driver helped with my small suitcase and asked no questions. At the airport, I bought a one-way ticket to a coastal city where I owned a property they knew nothing about. On the flight, I closed my eyes and heard my mother's voice. Margaret, never fully trust anyone, not even your own children. Blood can betray. Dignity cannot. She was right. And I was about to prove that a 72-year-old woman could be more formidable than any enemy they could ever imagine. The plane landed in a city I hadn't seen in 30 years, Seabrook Shores, Florida. A name my children had never heard me speak, because some things are too precious to share with people who don't deserve them. The salt air hit my face like a rush of memories. This was where it all began. Where I bought my first property with the life savings from my secretary's salary. $5,000 that once felt like a fortune, $5,000 that grew into the empire my children tried to steal. The taxi drove me through streets I still recognized, even after all this time. The palm trees were still there, taller now, their fronds whispering secrets to the wind. The old Florida-style homes still held their charm, though a few had been updated with that cold, modern look that stripped away all soul. "Is this the right address, ma'am?" the driver asked as we stopped in front of a small yellow house with green wooden shutters. "Looks like no one's lived here for a while." For the first time in days, I smiled. "It's perfect." The house looked as if it had been sleeping, waiting patiently for me to return. It was small compared to the properties my children knew about, but it held something none of the others had, my truth. This was my secret refuge, my escape plan, protected in silence for decades. I pulled the keys from my purse. My hand shook, not from age, but from the flood of memories. The front door opened with the same soft creak as before, like a sigh of welcome. The scent of old wood and sea salt wrapped around me. Sheets covered the furniture like ghosts frozen in time. Slowly, I lifted them one by one, revealing pieces of my past that I had left behind like seeds, waiting for the right season to bloom. In the kitchen, I found the first surprise. On the table sat a note, written in a frail but familiar handwriting. "Mrs. Whitlock, I've been waiting for you all these years. Eliza." My heart skipped a beat. Eliza had been my housekeeper for 15 years, until Charles and Leo declared she was unnecessary. "It's a waste of money, Mom. We can help with the house," they said. Another lie. They just wanted full control of my home, my time, and the people allowed near me. Footsteps sounded on the porch. My heart thudded against my ribs. The door opened, and there she stood. Eliza. 30 years older, hair now completely white, her face lined with stories time carved into her gently, yet her eyes held the same warmth I remembered. "I knew you'd come," she said softly, as if only days had passed, not decades. "When I heard what your children were planning, I knew you'd find your way back here." "How did you know about my children?" I asked. Eliza's smile carried sadness. "Penelope called me a month ago. She wanted information about your properties, any hidden bank accounts. I told her I knew nothing." Of course Penelope had been digging. It wasn't enough to rob me of what she knew, I had always sensed she feared there was more. The irony was almost sweet. They had reached out to the one person who knew every secret I kept, and she protected me. "But I did know," Eliza continued, stepping toward me with steady grace. "I knew about this house. The documents you stored here. Your plan. And I've been watching over everything, waiting for you." My eyes filled. For the first time in months, someone looked at me with respect, not pity, not greed. She saw me. The documents are safe, Eliza whispered, taking my hands. I checked on them every month. I made sure nothing was damaged. Your plan is still intact. My plan. I began shaping it 30 years ago, when I realized my children saw my properties as a guaranteed inheritance, not the result of my sacrifice. I built a web so intricate that even the best lawyer would struggle to unravel it. Where are they? I asked, barely above a whisper. Eliza led me to a back room I barely remembered. It had been transformed into a small office, metal filing cabinets lined the walls, and a built-in safe sat concealed behind a painted panel. The combination is still the same, she said, pointing to the safe. Your husband's birthday. My dear Richard, gone 10 years now, yet his wisdom was still guarding my future. Never put all your eggs in one basket, Margaret, he used to say. And never let anyone control your life, not even your own children. I opened the safe with steady hands. Inside were the documents I had protected for decades, property deeds my children had no clue existed, investments tucked away in international banks, and a completely different will than the one they secretly photographed. But the most precious thing was a thick folder labeled HC, Hope Center. Do you remember your dream? Eliza asked softly as I looked through the papers. You wanted to build a place where older women could live with dignity, where they'd never be treated like a burden. Of course, I remembered. That dream had carried me through some of my darkest years, a home for women like me, women pushed aside by their families, betrayed by their own children, or forgotten by a society that throws us away once we are no longer useful. Everything is ready, Eliza continued. The permits, the blueprints, the funds, set aside just for this. All it needed was for you to come back. Tears rolled down my face. For months, I had felt like my life was collapsing, like I no longer mattered. Yet here was proof that I had always been moving toward a greater purpose, one far bigger than my children's greed. Anything else? I asked. Eliza pulled a phone from her purse. Mr. Cromwell has been waiting for your call. Mr. Cromwell, my lawyer. The only person who knew everything. I had hired him in secret 5 years ago, paying him from accounts my children would never find. Is he still trustworthy? I whispered, though I already knew. More than ever, she replied. His own son tried to have him declared incompetent last year. He understands exactly what you're facing. I took the phone with a new sense of resolve. The next chapter of my plan was about to begin, turning what looked like defeat into the most satisfying victory of my life. I dialed the number I'd memorized long ago. He answered on the second ring. Margaret, he said, his voice warm, relieved. I knew you'd call today. Are you ready? More than ready, Mr. Cromwell. It's time my children remember who I am. It's all set for tomorrow, he said, with a confidence that steadied my heart. Your children have arranged a family meeting at your house at 10 a.m. They believe they'll be signing papers to transfer your assets. I smiled, watching the ocean outside my secret refuge. The waves crashed with the same fury I felt inside. Who's attending? I asked. Charles, Leo, and Penelope, and they've also invited Tobias, your brother. They want witnesses to make everything look legal. They're even bringing their own lawyer, Mr. Evans. Not exactly known for integrity. Tobias. My jealous older brother, who had never forgiven me for inheriting the family home. Of course he'd show up, like a vulture waiting for scraps. And our plan? I asked. Perfect, he replied. I'll arrive at 10:30, once they're feeling secure. I have all the original documents, last year's recordings, and the special surprise. Yes, the special surprise. A video I'd recorded 2 years ago, when I first sensed this day was coming. In it, I explained everything, my real plans, my reasons, and secrets my children prayed would never surface. Eliza will be with me, I added, glancing at her as she made coffee with the comfort of a woman who never stopped belonging in my home. She has information they need to hear. Excellent, he said. The more credible voices on your side, the better. Are you sure you want to do this? Once we start, there's no turning back. I thought of Penelope's fake smile, Charles's lies, Leo's greed, of the years I poured into raising children who now viewed my death as a business opportunity. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. That night, Eliza and I stayed up late, sharing memories, planning the future. She told me what happened after my children fired her. I found work with another family in the city, she said as we sipped chamomile tea. But I never stopped thinking about you. Every month, I came here to check on the house, just in case you returned. How did you know I would come back? I asked. Because I know you, Mrs. Whitlock. You don't give up. And 5 years ago, when you started doubting your children, you told me, if I ever disappear, look for me here first. She was right. The signs had been there, whispered conversations that stopped when I walked in, prying questions about my finances, the uneasy glances they exchanged. There's something else, Eliza said, her face turning serious. 3 months ago, Penelope came to see me. She didn't just ask about your properties, she asked if I noticed any signs of dementia or confusion. A chill ran through me. What did you tell her? I told her you are the sharpest woman I know, mind like a steel trap. She didn't like that answer. Of course not. They needed a mental incompetence story to justify stealing everything. They had planned it all, the sleeping pills, the constant questioning of dates and time, to make me doubt myself. But there's more. Eliza stood and retrieved a small box. I found this in the trash the day they dismissed me. Inside were the love letters Richard wrote while we were dating, letters I had cherished for 50 years. Letters that had strangely vanished from my room a month ago. They threw them away, Eliza whispered. Like garbage. I held them with shaking hands. The paper still smelled faintly of Richard's cologne. Every letter was a piece of my heart, and my children tossed them out as if they meant nothing. Why would they do that? I asked, voice cracking. Because real love makes them uncomfortable, Eliza said gently. Your marriage, your kindness, your strength, those remind them of everything they lack. That night, I couldn't sleep. I read each letter, remembering the man who loved me for who I was, not for what I owned. He built our first business with me, celebrated every win, carried me through every loss. Margaret, he wrote in one of his last letters, you are stronger than you think. If I'm ever gone, remember your worth isn't in what you have, but in what you give. And if anyone ever tries to take that from you, fight. Fight with every bit of strength God gave you. My worth. For months, I had allowed my children to make me feel small, confused, incapable. I played the fragile elderly woman because some part of me still hoped they would protect me. But Richard was right. My worth wasn't measured by their love or respect, it came from within. At 8 a.m., Mr. Cromwell called with the final update. Your children are very nervous, he said with a faint chuckle. They spent the night calling the police, reporting you missing. Missing? I said, almost amused. Of course. They're pushing the narrative that you're confused and vulnerable. A woman in your condition couldn't possibly disappear on her own. They're setting up a kidnapping or manipulation story. The irony was delicious. While they were painting me as a helpless victim, I was preparing my return as a woman who would reclaim everything, and more. Are you ready? Mr. Cromwell asked. I looked at Richard's love letters. I looked at Eliza laying out my best black dress. I looked at the sea, the witness to my first dreams. I had spent 72 years learning who I was. Now it was time to teach my children the most important lesson of their lives. I'm ready to reclaim what's mine. The drive back felt like a victory march. Eliza sat beside me, quiet, steady, loyal. Mr. Cromwell followed behind with the documents that would change everything. I dressed like the CEO I had always been, prepared for the most important meeting of my life. The one where I would show my children the difference between a helpless old woman and a woman with 72 years of strength, and a memory like steel. The taxi stopped a block from my house. Their cars lined the street like vultures circling a meal, Charles's gray BMW, Leo's white Mercedes, an unfamiliar car that had to belong to their crooked lawyer, and Tobias's beat-up red truck. My brother had clearly come to enjoy the feast. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Eliza asked again, though her eyes already held my answer. More sure than ever. Mr. Cromwell had arrived 10 minutes early and waited in his car, reviewing everything one last time. He rolled down his window as I approached, offering a smile that promised justice. "Everything's ready," he said, holding up a digital recorder. "I have the confessions we recorded last year when you first suspected them. And I have certified copies of all the real documents, not the fakes they think you'll sign." Recording those conversations had been my insurance, my shield for the betrayal I saw coming. In them, Charles and Leo openly admitted they were waiting for me to die, that they considered everything I built rightfully theirs, and that I was in the way. "And the video?" I asked. "Loaded and ready. When the moment comes, we press play, and their own words will bury them." I walked toward my home, each step landing like a gavel-striking judgment. Strange, how a place once filled with warmth could now feel like enemy territory. They believed the Queen had abandoned her castle. A fatal mistake. I rang the doorbell of my own house. The symbolism made me smile. They had taken over so completely that I now had to ask to enter my own home. Penelope opened the door. The emotions on her face were a masterpiece: shock, fear, frantic calculation, and then the fake, sugary smile I knew too well. "Margaret." "Oh, thank God, we were so worried," she gushed. "Where have you been?" "We called the police, the hospitals." "I was thinking," I replied calmly, stepping inside as if seeing my home for the first time. "And making some important decisions." Charles rushed in from the living room, with Leo and Tobias right behind him. Their expressions, relief mixed with sheer panic, were a sight worth framing. "Mom, you had us worried sick," Charles said, reaching to hug me. I stepped back, polite but firm. "Worried about me, or worried about your plans?" The silence grew so thick it almost hummed. Leo cleared his throat, Penelope darted her eyes between them. I don't know what you mean," Leo stuttered, his voice betraying him. "Oh, I think you do." At that moment, a knock came at the door. Mr. Evans, the slim, mustached lawyer they had hired, stood at the dining table, surrounded by the forged transfer papers. "Who is it?" he asked. "My legal representative," I announced, voice sharp enough to cut glass. "George Cromwell. Specialist in elder fraud and asset protection." My children's faces drained of color. Tobias took a step back, suddenly realizing this family meeting had turned into something else entirely. Mr. Cromwell entered with Eliza at his side, carrying the briefcase that held the end of their scheme. He introduced himself to Mr. Evans, who instantly began sweating like a sinner in church. "Mrs. Whitlock," Mr. Cromwell said formally, "I understand there are documents your children wish you to sign, transferring your assets to them." "That's correct," I said, watching Charles try, and fail, to steady himself. "Excellent. But before we proceed, I'll need to verify a few legal formalities." He opened the folder. "For instance, I must confirm that you are mentally competent to make this decision." "Of course she's competent," Penelope snapped too quickly. "She just, gets a little confused sometimes because of her age." "Interesting." Mr. Cromwell smiled like a shark that had smelled blood. "Because I also have a very recent medical report from Dr. Sanchez confirming Mrs. Whitlock is in excellent mental health and fully competent to make her own decisions," he said. I slid the report from my purse, obtained 2 days before my disappearance, anticipating this exact moment. "And I have some very interesting recordings," he continued. "Made right here in this house, exactly 1 year ago." Color drained from my children's faces. Charles grabbed the back of a chair as if steadying himself. I don't know what you're talking about, Leo whispered, but his voice was paper thin. Mr. Cromwell pressed play. Charles's voice rang out, clear as glass, let's just hope she dies soon. I'm tired of pretending I care. Once she's gone, we sell everything and split it. Leo's voice followed, we just need to declare her incompetent. Then it's all ours. And Penelope, she's a stubborn old woman. If she won't cooperate, we'll put her in the cheapest home and that'll be that. Silence hit the room like a funeral bell. Tobias stared at me in dawning horror, realizing the conspiracy he'd stumbled into. Those recordings are taken out of context, Charles stammered, but there was no conviction in it. Out of context? Mr. Cromwell's laugh had no humor. I have 3 hours of similar recordings, made with your mother's knowledge, after she began suspecting your plans. Eliza stepped to the table and picked up the stack of papers they'd prepared. She examined each with the confident authority of someone who knew the true documents inside and out. These are fraudulent, she declared. Signatures forged. Assets listed that don't exist in any official record. That's impossible, Mr. Evans spluttered, but he was already stuffing papers into a folder, looking for an exit. It's very possible when your own children have been planning to rob you for years, I said, my voice steady at last. And especially possible when that mother is far smarter than you ever guessed. Mr. Cromwell produced the envelope with the video I'd recorded 2 years earlier, the one where I explained my plans and exposed secrets that would ruin them. Now, I said, sitting at my table like the CEO I'd always been, let's talk about consequences. Sit, I ordered. It's time you heard truths you've avoided for years. They slumped into chairs like schoolchildren awaiting judgment. Tobias remained standing, shame written across him. Mr. Evans tried to slip away, but Cromwell quietly blocked him. Let's talk numbers, I said, pacing like a prosecutor. You think the estate is worth $1.5 million? Nervous glances. They had done their math in secret, assuming I was clueless. You're off by more than $3 million, I continued, savoring every second of their shock. Even Eliza looked surprised, though she'd been part of the plan. My real net worth, I said, including properties you don't know about, international investments, and businesses I've run quietly for decades, exceeds $5 million. $5 million? Penelope went ashen. Charles gripped his chair as if the floor had dropped away. 5.2 million, to be exact, I added, enjoying their dismay. Money they thought they'd steal while I sat knitting in some dreary institution. Mr. Cromwell opened his laptop and projected a presentation on the wall, an itemized summary of properties, accounts, and investments. Each slide landed like a slap: main house $600,000, beach house $450,000, downtown condo $300,000. Then the slides revealed the things they'd never imagined: 2 Miami condos, a small Key West hotel, stakes in growth funds, shares in tech firms, and overseas accounts in Switzerland and Panama. How? Charles tried to choke out the question. How did a senile woman manage this without us noticing? I smiled, cold, satisfied, the smile of someone who had planned this day for years. Very simple, I said quietly. You completely underestimated your mother. Eliza stepped forward and placed another folder on the table. These, she explained, are the businesses Mrs. Whitlock has been running privately: a real estate consultancy, 2 investment firms, and the project that means the most to her. What project? Penelope asked, her voice tight. This was the moment I had waited years to reveal, the dream I'd been building in silence. The Hope Center, I announced. Their blank faces told me they had no idea. A residential community for older women abandoned by their families, for women whose children treat them like burdens instead of human beings. Mr. Cromwell switched the slide. A stunning architectural design filled the screen: gardens, a library, art rooms, medical care, and dignified apartments for 200 women. The land is already purchased, I continued. Permits approved. Construction begins next month. And you, my dear children, have become the very inspiration for this project. I don't understand, Leo whispered. Every time you spoke to me like I was useless, every time you discussed my future as if I were furniture, every time you made plans for my life behind my back, I added another service to the Hope Center. Thanks to you, it will be the finest of its kind in this country. Tobias finally spoke, shaken. Margaret. I had no idea. I thought this was just a normal family meeting. I know, Tobias. Which is why you are not in legal trouble. But I pointed to my 3 cold-hearted children, they will face every consequence. Mr. Cromwell stepped in. Attempting to defraud a senior is a federal crime. Forging documents is another. Conspiring to declare someone incompetent without medical grounds is yet another. We are talking about multiple charges that could lead to years in prison. You can't do this to us. Charles exploded, jumping to his feet. We're your family. We're your children. Exactly, I replied, my voice like ice. Which makes your betrayal more painful, and more unforgivable. I walked up to Charles and forced him to look me in the eye. I paid $80,000 for your education, $50,000 for the down payment on your first home. I loaned you $30,000 for your business, which you never repaid. I gave you 45 years of love, and this is how you repay me? I turned to Leo. I paid $100,000 in medical bills when your son had leukemia. I helped with your divorce, $40,000 in legal fees. I housed you for 2 years when you lost your job. I supported you when no one else did, and this is how you repay me? Finally, I faced Penelope. I accepted you as a daughter when you married into this family. I defended you when others criticized you. I included you in my will when you weren't even my blood. I gave you the love your own parents failed to give you, and this is how you repay me? Tears ran down my cheeks, not from sadness, but from liberation. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel the anger I had buried. For months, I let you make me feel small. I pretended to be confused when you needed me to be confused. I acted weak so you could justify your plans. It was all an act. A test. A test you failed, Mr. Cromwell added. Eliza placed one last document on the table, my real will. This is my true will, I said. Written 3 years ago and updated 6 months ago when your intentions became obvious. Charles leaned forward to read it, but Mr. Cromwell blocked him. In this will, Charles receives $5,000. Leo receives $5,000. Penelope receives nothing, because legally, she is not my family, and emotionally, she has proven the same. $5,000? Leo shouted. That's impossible. We're your children. The remaining $4,990,000, I continued calmly, will be divided between the Hope Center, 3 senior protection charities, and Eliza, who has shown more loyalty in 30 years of friendship than you have in your entire lives. Penelope began to cry, but I felt nothing. Charles slammed the table. Leo collapsed into his chair as if the weight of his choices finally hit him. But, I said at last, watching them cling to the last thread of hope, there is a way. What way? Charles asked desperately. You earn it. The Hope Center needs leadership. It needs people who value dignity and compassion. If, over the next 5 years, you prove that you care about more than money, if you show you understand the harm you caused and truly work to repair it, then we will discuss an inheritance. 5 years, Leo muttered. Yes, I said. 5 years working at the Hope Center. 5 years proving you can treat older people as human beings, not burdens. 5 years proving you deserve to be called my children. The silence that followed was long and heavy. I could almost see their thoughts spinning, calculating, bargaining, scrambling for options that no longer existed. And if we refuse? Penelope asked, her voice sharp with defiance. Mr. Cromwell didn't even blink. Then you face full criminal charges for fraud and attempted exploitation of a senior. And any possibility of inheritance disappears forever. It was the perfect ultimatum: justice with a door to redemption. Consequences with love. Discipline with hope. Exactly what a mother should offer, not punishment for punishment's sake, but a chance to grow. The choice is yours, I said. You may walk out that door and never see me again, or you can stay and begin the long road to earning back my respect, and your own dignity. Your next words will decide whether I still have children, or just strangers who share my blood. Silence settled again, stretching between us like a tight wire ready to snap. I watched them weigh pride against survival, ego against opportunity. It was astonishing to see decades of motherhood reduced, in their minds, to a math problem. Charles finally spoke, his voice cracking. Mom, we never meant to hurt you. We just thought. You thought it would be better to lock me away knitting while you spent my money, I cut in. You thought a 72-year-old woman had no right to control her own life. That's not what we meant, Leo protested weakly. We only wanted you to be safe, to be taken care of. Liar. The word came out sharp and fast. The only safety you cared about was the safety of your bank accounts. You weren't protecting me, you were protecting your future spending. Penelope wiped her tears, smearing her expensive makeup. So what are we supposed to do now? How are we supposed to live without money? Like millions of people do every single day, I replied. By working. By earning your way through effort and decency instead of waiting for someone to die so you can finance your lifestyle. Mr. Cromwell, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. You have 24 hours to decide. If you choose the Hope Center program, you begin tomorrow morning. If not, I will file the charges immediately. But we have jobs, responsibilities, Charles protested. You had jobs, I corrected. What you have now is a chance at redemption you frankly haven't earned. I walked to the window and looked out at the garden I had nurtured for decades. My roses were still in bloom, unbothered by betrayal, untouched by disappointment. Nature doesn't stop growing because of pain. It grows through it. Do you know what the most painful part of this has been? I asked softly, still facing the window. It wasn't hearing you plot to steal from me. It wasn't listening to you count my money like vultures circling a body. I turned to them, and the truth poured out. The most painful part was realizing you never really knew me. Not at all. Their faces reflected confusion, as if hearing this for the first time. For 72 years, I had been a woman who fought, who built, who dreamed. I turned $5,000 into over $5 million. I built a real estate business in a world that wasn't made for women, especially not for mothers. I raised 2 children while managing properties, investments, and life. And you reduced me to a confused old woman who needed craft classes to stay busy. My voice strengthened, years of swallowed triumph finally given air. You saw me as a burden, instead of the woman who built everything you wanted to inherit. Eliza gently placed a hand on my shoulder, grounding me. Not all relationships are transactional. Some are built on loyalty and love. And there's something else you need to understand, I said, returning to my seat. The Hope Center isn't charity. It's my legacy. It's proof that an older woman can still change the world, without waiting to die in a room that smells like disinfectant. Mr. Cromwell switched the slide on his laptop, revealing the detailed plans for the Hope Center. It was stunning, modern buildings surrounded by gardens, spaces for art and music, a library designed just for seniors, medical clinics, and apartments that felt like real homes, not rooms people wait to die in. 200 women will live here, I said softly. Women abandoned by their families. Women left with nothing after late life divorces. Women who deserve to grow old with dignity, not shame. It's impressive, Tobias finally said, breaking his long silence. When do you open? Construction begins in 6 weeks, I replied. The first phase will be ready in 18 months. And if my children choose redemption, they will help build it. What kind of work would we have to do? Leo asked carefully. All kinds, Eliza answered before I could. Cleaning, gardening, administrative work, resident support. Real work. Honest work. Work that teaches the value of serving instead of being served. But we don't know how to do that, Penelope protested. You'll learn, I said. The same way I learned business at your age. The same way I learned the stock market at 50. The same way I learned computers at 60. I did it for growth. You will do it for survival and redemption. Charles stood and began pacing, his hands trembling. This is unreal. 2 days ago we thought. 2 days ago, I finished, you thought you were the heirs to a multi-million-dollar legacy. Now you know you are the cautionary tale of what happens when children betray their mother. And if we do it, Leo asked, if we work at your center for 5 years, will you really change the will? This was the moment, whether this would be vengeance or justice. If, for 5 years, you show that you can value people for who they are, not what they own, if you learn to give instead of take, if you show the character I once believed I raised in you, then yes, I will amend the will. How much? Penelope asked, always direct when money was involved. Enough for you to live comfortably, but not enough to become the selfish people you were. Let's say, $500,000 each. $500,000, life-changing for most, but a fraction of what they tried to steal. Enough to reward growth, but not enough to enable regression. And the rest? Charles asked. The rest stays with the Hope Center, to ensure women like me are never treated as burdens again. Mr. Cromwell closed his laptop with a sharp, final click. As I said, you have 24 hours. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., you either arrive at the Hope Center site ready to work, or I file the criminal charges. And don't waste time looking for another lawyer, I've secured evidence in multiple locations. This is not negotiable. After he left, the room fell into a heavy silence, the kind that forces truth to settle. Would you really have us arrested? Charles asked, his voice small. Were you really planning to put me in a nursing home and sell everything I built? I replied. He swallowed. Touché. Eliza moved closer to me. Mrs. Whitlock, are you sure you want to give them a chance after all they've done? I'm sure, I said, though my heart still ached. Because no matter how deep the wound, they are still my children. And a mother never stops hoping her children will become the people she once believed they could be. It was my final gamble, my last hope that blood might still be stronger than greed. Morning found me awake before dawn, brewing coffee in the same kitchen where my children once toasted my dementia with cheap champagne. Eliza had stayed overnight, and we sat together, watching the sky shift from black to gray, waiting to see what choice my children would make. Do you think they'll come? She asked gently, pouring coffee into the porcelain cups I inherited from my mother. I exhaled. Honestly? I don't know. A part of me hopes they do. Part of me hoped they would come. Part of me prayed they wouldn't. And I wasn't sure which part of me was stronger. At 8 a.m., my phone rang. It was Mr. Cromwell. Good morning, Margaret. Ready for the first day of school? As ready as a mother can be, I replied, when she's about to learn whether she still has children, or just strangers who share her DNA. I've been at the site since 7, he said. Everything is prepared. The foremen have been briefed on the special situation with our new, he paused, choosing his words carefully, volunteers. Volunteers. A polite way to describe people working to avoid prison. Any sign of them? Not yet. But we still have 2 hours. Eliza and I arrived at the Hope Center construction site at 9:30. It was my first time seeing the land since the groundwork began, and emotion rose in my throat like a tide. There it was, my dream, finally taking form. Tractors carved out the earth where healing gardens would soon bloom. Workers marked the foundations of buildings that would shelter women who, like me, had been tossed aside by their own families. It's beautiful, Eliza whispered, taking my arm. It's hope, I corrected softly. Proof that it's never too late to start over, to make change, to show the world that older women are not garbage to be thrown away. Mr. Cromwell approached with a clipboard and a yellow hard hat. Everything's ready. If they show up, they start with basic tasks, clearing debris, sorting materials, helping with manual labor. And if they don't? Your 11 o'clock appointment with the district attorney, I finished for him. He nodded. 9:55. 9:57. 9:59. At exactly 10 o'clock, a taxi pulled up to the gate. My heart slammed against my ribs. Charles stepped out first, wearing worn jeans and an old t-shirt I hadn't seen in years. Leo followed, dressed in brand new work clothes he clearly bought in a panic the night before. Last came Penelope, in athletic wear, her hair pulled back in a plain ponytail, stripped of luxury, stripped of armor. They looked vulnerable. Scared. Human. They walked toward us slowly, like people headed toward their own sentencing. Up close, I saw the truth in their faces, none of them had slept. Eyes swollen, cheeks pale, the weight of consequences heavy on their shoulders. "We're here," Charles said quietly. "I see that," I replied, steadying my voice even as my heart tumbled inside me. "We've decided," Leo swallowed hard. "We want to try to fix things." "Are you sure?" "Because once you begin, there is no turning back. 5 full years, or prison." Penelope nodded. "We're sure. Or, at least we're sure we don't want to go to prison." Not a noble motivation, but a beginning. Mr. Cromwell stepped forward with 3 hard hats. "Welcome to the Hope Center. I am your supervisor. For the next 5 years, I will be the most important person in your lives, second only to your mother." He handed them a list of rules. Work hours are 8 to 5 o'clock. 1 hour lunch. 0 tolerance for complaints, excuses, or bad attitudes. Weekly evaluations. Your direct supervisor for now is Mike. He pointed to a broad-shouldered man with rough, work-worn hands and kind eyes. "Mike has 30 years of construction experience," Mr. Cromwell added, "and absolutely no patience for princes or princesses who've never worked a day in their lives." Mike walked over, sizing them up in a single glance, like a man who can smell laziness a mile away. "Any of you ever done physical labor before?" he asked. Silence. "Perfect," he said with a grin. "We'll start simple. See that pile of rubble?" He pointed to a mountain of broken concrete and rusted metal. "It needs to be moved from here to there." He pointed about 200 yards away. "By hand?" Penelope gasped. "By hand," he confirmed. "Piece by piece. It's honest work, for people who need to remember what effort feels like." I watched as they approached the rubble like it was Everest. Charles lifted the first chunk of concrete and immediately groaned. Leo tried to carry too much at once and nearly toppled backward. Penelope looked at her manicured hands, exhaled shakily, and accepted her fate. For 4 hours, I stood there and watched. It was messy. Clumsy. Hard. Charles complained about his back. Leo stopped every 10 minutes to catch his breath. Penelope broke 2 nails within the first hour and cried silently for another 10. But, they worked. At lunch, they sat on the ground like everyone else, eating basic sandwiches, drinking lukewarm water from a shared thermos. For the first time in years, they did not look superior. They just looked like people. Their clothes were filthy, their hands scraped and stained, their faces flushed from sun and strain. "How are you feeling?" I asked, walking over during their break. "Like we got hit by a truck," Charles groaned, rubbing his shoulders. "This is harder than we thought," Leo admitted, catching his breath. "And what exactly did you think?" I asked gently. "That honest work was supposed to be easy? That the people who build this country with their hands do it for fun?" Penelope looked at me, and for the first time I saw something new in her eyes, understanding. Real, uncomfortable understanding. "I never thought about it," she said quietly. "I never thought about how hard it is to earn a living like this." "Now you know," I replied. And this is only day 1 of 1825. The afternoon was worse. Their bodies weren't conditioned for physical work, every movement became slower, heavier. But around 3 o'clock, something unexpected happened, they began helping each other. Charles lifted stones Penelope couldn't manage. Leo brought water to Charles when he noticed him fading. Penelope found extra gloves for Leo when she saw his hands blistering. Small acts of kindness, simple, human gestures, they hadn't shown each other in years. At 5 o'clock sharp, Mike blew his whistle. First day's done. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. Be late, and we start the day over. My children shuffled toward their taxi, moving like elderly strangers in their own bodies. Before getting in, Charles turned back. Mom, thank you for giving us this chance. We know we don't deserve it. You don't deserve it yet, I corrected softly. But maybe, just maybe, after 1,824 more days, you will. That night, Eliza and I ate dinner in quiet reflection. The day had been emotionally overwhelming. Seeing my children sweat, struggle, and bend, not in entitlement but effort, felt strange. Painful. And hopeful. Do you think they'll make it? Eliza asked as we washed dishes. I don't know, I said honestly. But for the first time in a long while. I'm curious to see who they might become if they truly finish these 5 years. I looked out the window at the stars beginning to bloom across the night sky. The hardest part had begun, the waiting. Waiting to see if justice could transform into redemption, if consequences could become growth. 5 years to learn whether I still had children, or whether I had finally built something better, a family grounded in respect rather than convenience. Time would tell. 4.5 years passed since that first day of rubble and tears. The Hope Center was no longer a dream on paper, it was alive. A thriving community where 200 women lived with dignity, joy, and purpose. I walked through the gardens my children had helped plant, watching residents in painting classes, book clubs, and gentle yoga. The smell of roses and jasmine floated through the air, blended with laughter from the creative workshop wing. Good morning, Mrs. Whitlock, called Alice, an 80-year-old resident whose family abandoned her for being too expensive. Now she ran our oral history program, helping women preserve their life stories for future generations. Good morning, Alice. How's the memoir project going? Incredible. We already have 50 completed stories. Women who were nurses in wars. Teachers who shaped entire towns. Mothers who raised 10 children while working factory shifts. Stories that would have vanished forever. Yes. This was the dream, to create a place where older women weren't treated as burdens, but as living libraries of wisdom. Have you seen Charles this morning? I asked. He's in the kitchen helping with the special birthday breakfast for Carmen, she turns 90 today. Charles, in the kitchen. If someone had told me 5 years earlier that my son would be baking cakes for elderly women, I would have laughed until tears rolled down my face. Now, it was simply who he was. I found him decorating a cake with the focus of a surgeon. His hands, calloused from years of labor, held the piping bag with surprising gentleness. 90 pink roses or 90 blue, he asked without turning, somehow knowing I was there. Pink, I said. Carmen says blue reminds her too much of hospitals. Pink it is, he said, and continued decorating with a care and patience I had never witnessed in his former life. He placed each frosting rose as if it carried meaning. You know, he added, concentration still on his task, Carmen told me yesterday she was one of the first female accountants in her city. Managed the finances of 3 big companies back when women could barely get a bank account without a husband signing for them. And what do you think about that? I asked. This time he looked up. His eyes held a depth that hadn't existed 5 years ago. I think I was a fool to ever believe age decided someone's value, he admitted. Carmen knows more about finance than I did after 40 years in business. It wasn't just an apology, it was an awakening. He wasn't only acknowledging his mistake with me, but his flawed beliefs about aging. Where are Leo and Penelope? Leo's in physical therapy with Mercedes, helping with her rehab exercises. And Penelope's in the beauty salon. The salon had been Penelope's idea in her second year. She had noticed how many residents were losing their sense of identity after being neglected: no haircuts, no self-care, no dignity. She proposed a salon where aging women could feel beautiful again, inside and out. Now, she ran a thriving little studio where residents had their hair done, received gentle manicures adapted to arthritis, and rediscovered confidence that age had not erased. I walked to the salon and saw Penelope massaging the arthritic hands of Miriam, a retired professor who'd been abandoned by her daughter at a public hospital. "Does that hurt?" Penelope asked tenderly. "Not at all, sweetheart. Your hands are magic. They haven't felt this good in years." Penelope had changed in 1,000 subtle ways. Less makeup. No designer clothes. Her beauty was softer now, real. But the biggest change was in her eyes. Where there was once entitlement, now lived empathy. "Mrs. Whitlock," she said warmly when she noticed me. "Are you here to see the new arthritis hand treatment I designed?" "I'm here to see you," I said honestly. A hint of a blush touched her cheeks. Over the years, she had learned to value recognition for her effort, not for appearances or manipulation. "Can we talk for a minute?" I asked. She finished with Miriam, then joined me outside in the garden. We sat on a bench overlooking the entire complex. I often sat here to reflect, to see the physical proof that my life's purpose had taken shape. "How do you feel?" I asked gently. "Tired," she exhaled. But a different tired. Before, I was exhausted from pretending to be perfect, wealthy, superior. Now I'm tired from working hard, but I sleep better than I have in my entire life. "Do you regret anything?" I asked. She watched a group of residents practicing Tai Chi on the lawn before answering. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. "I regret being blind," she said. "Blind to who you were. Blind to the fact that I saw only your money, not the extraordinary woman who earned it. I regret trying to take instead of trying to learn." I had waited years for those words. Oddly, now that they had arrived, I realized I no longer needed them. Her actions had already spoken louder than any apology could. "And what have you learned?" I asked softly. "That respect isn't inherited, it's earned. That age brings wisdom, not incompetence. And that caring for others feels infinitely better than being cared for." She paused, then added the words that pierced straight into my heart. "And I learned that you weren't just my wealthy mother-in-law. You were an example of what a woman can build when she refuses to accept limits." Her words felt like sunlight breaking through a storm I'd lived under for years. Before I could respond, Leo came jogging across the courtyard from the rehab center, waving with excitement. "Mom. Mercedes walked 10 steps today. 10 full steps." My son, who once felt nothing unless money was involved, now glowed like a child over the physical progress of an 85-year-old woman who wasn't related to him in any way. "She says she wants to walk to her rose garden next week," he said breathlessly. Can you imagine? 6 months ago, she couldn't sit up on her own. "And what will you do to help her get there?" I asked. "I already spoke to the physical therapist," he said. "We're making a special strengthening program for her. I'll be with her through every session." Then he hesitated, genuinely, respectfully. If that's okay with you, of course." It was the first time in years he had asked for my blessing for something that came from a place of love, not greed. That afternoon, Mr. Cromwell came by for our monthly review. We sat in my office at the center, surrounded by photos of residents, awards, and handwritten letters from grateful families. "How do you think they're doing?" he asked, scanning his notes from the past few months. "They've changed in ways I never thought possible," I admitted. "Not just in their work here, but in who they are as people." "Do you believe it's real change, or are they still performing for your approval?" It was the same question I had wrestled with for months. "At first, they were definitely performing," I said. "But there's something about this work, about serving others, that strips away pretense. You can't fake compassion for 4.5 years. So yes, I think they've discovered better versions of themselves. Versions I never got to meet before. Mr. Cromwell smiled. And the will? The will can wait another 6 months. I need to see how they handle the final decision. What decision? In 6 months, their mandatory time ends. They'll be free to leave and live however they choose. The question is, will they stay because they want to, or will they walk away the moment the obligation disappears? It was the ultimate test. Anyone can change when they have no choice. But when freedom returns, your true character shows. And if they leave, I continued, I'll know I was right to change my will. And if they stay, I'll know I truly have my children back. That night, I had dinner with Eliza in the communal dining room, surrounded by chatter and laughter from women who had built a second family here in their golden years. Are you nervous about the next 6 months? Eliza asked. Curious, I corrected. After 76 years, I've learned the best surprises come when you stop trying to control them. 6 months later, the day I had waited 5 years for finally arrived. A warm spring sun filtered through my blinds as I reviewed the documents Mr. Cromwell prepared. The revised will sat on my desk, sealed, holding the future of everything I built. But before I opened it, I needed to hear their decision. At 10 a.m. sharp, Charles, Leo, and Penelope arrived in their work clothes. After 5 years, I could read their hearts as easily as their expressions. Today, they looked calm. Certain. Good morning, I said, inviting them to sit. Do you know why we're here? Today marks exactly 5 years since we began, Charles replied. And according to our agreement, we're free to leave. Exactly. Your obligation is over. No legal consequences. No requirements. You are completely free. Silence stretched across the room. They had clearly rehearsed this moment. We've made a decision, Penelope said at last, her voice steady, but full of feeling. I'm listening. Leo spoke first. We want to stay. Not because we have to, because we want to. My heart paused, but I kept my face neutral. Why? Because this place is home, Charles said. These women are family. And the work we do here is the most meaningful thing we've ever done. And, Penelope added, tears gathering, we finally understand what you tried to teach us. Life isn't about what you can take, it's about what you give. I stood and looked out the window. There was Mercedes, walking slowly but confidently toward her beloved rose garden, just as Leo once promised she would. Nearby, Carmen was teaching basic math to a group of newer residents. And what about your lives outside this place? Your careers? Your dreams? Our dreams are here now, Leo said. I've been studying geriatric physical therapy at night. I want to be certified so I can help our residents properly. I've enrolled in courses on the psychology of aging, Penelope said. I want to understand how to support the women who arrive here scared, fragile, and alone. And I, Charles added, have been training with Mr. Cromwell to learn nonprofit management. I want to ensure this center thrives for decades. I had raised business-minded children, yet they had grown into compassionate leaders. There's one more thing, Charles said carefully. We'd like to make a formal request. What kind of request? We want to renounce any inheritance, Penelope said softly. We want every dollar to stay here at the Hope Center, forever. I turned, genuinely stunned for the first time in years. Are you certain? Absolutely, Leo said. For 5 years, we've seen what money can do when it's used with purpose. We don't want to inherit your fortune. We want to protect your legacy. The tears I had been holding back for 5 years finally broke free. Not tears of sadness, tears of a pride so deep it ached inside my chest. Do you understand what this means? I asked. It means we'll work here the rest of our lives for modest salaries, Charles said. It means we won't ever be wealthy, but we'll be part of something far more important than money. It means, Penelope added softly, we might finally be worthy of being called your children. I walked to my desk and picked up the envelope containing the modified will. Slowly, deliberately, I tore it to pieces in front of him. "What are you doing?" Leo asked, stunned. "That will give you $500,000 each if you completed the 5 years," I said. "But you've just proven you don't need my money to become the people I always prayed you'd be." I reached for a second document, the one I had prepared a week earlier after watching their true transformation unfold. "This is my real will," I said. In it, Charles is named executive director of the Hope Center, with a respectable, but not extravagant, salary. Leo is director of rehabilitation programs. And Penelope is director of emotional wellness and creative development. Their eyes widened. "The rest of my estate," I continued, $4.8 million, "will fund a network of centers across the country. The 3 of you will lead that expansion, so no older woman ever again faces what I nearly did." "A network," Charles whispered. 10 centers in the next 15 years. Each one run by people who understand that caring for our elders isn't charity, it's justice." They rose at the same time and wrapped their arms around me. It was the kind of embrace I hadn't felt since they were little, but now it was different. It was the embrace of grown adults who had earned the right to love and be loved. "Why?" Penelope asked through her tears. "After everything we did to you, why give us this chance?" "Because you are no longer the people who betrayed me," I said. "You became the people I always believed you could be. You just needed time to find yourselves." That afternoon, we gathered the residents to share the news. The room filled quickly with women who had come to love my children over the years. "I am honored to announce," I said from the small podium, "that the Hope Center will not only continue, but expand to help thousands of women across this country." Applause erupted. "And I am even more honored to announce that my children, Charles, Leo, and Penelope, have chosen to dedicate their lives to this mission." Mercedes rose slowly, leaning on her cane. "Mrs. Whitlock, may I speak?" "Of course." "Your children came here as punishment," she said, her voice soft but steady. "But they are leaving as a blessing. They cared for us when we were sick, comforted us when we were lonely, and celebrated our joys. I don't know what kind of mother raises children capable of such change, but you are an example to us all." That night, my children, Eliza, and I shared dinner in the communal dining room. For the first time in 5 years, we sat together as a family, not as supervisor and employees, not as victim and offenders, but as people who truly loved and respected one another. "What now?" Eliza asked. "Now," Charles said, "we change the way this country treats its seniors. We'll make sure," Leo added, "that no woman ever has to choose between dignity and safety in her old age. And we'll prove," Penelope said, "that a family can be rebuilt, not through convenience, but through respect." Later, I walked alone through the garden, my nightly ritual. But tonight felt different. Tonight, I could finally exhale. At 76, I had achieved something few mothers ever do, not just raising accomplished children, but transforming lost ones into extraordinary human beings. My legacy would not be measured in dollars or property. It would be measured in dignity restored, in lives uplifted, in love turned into action. I looked up at the stars above the Hope Center and remembered something Richard wrote to me before he passed. "A legacy isn't a monument. It's a map." He was right. I had created a map for families to find their way back to love, and my children would now carry it to thousands of women. Vengeance had turned into redemption. Justice had become grace. And I, a woman nearly buried alive by her own family, had found a way to resurrect not only my life, but the lives of everyone around me. This, at last, was a legacy worth leaving.